Warhammer the Old World is about to be released, but how did we get here? So, just a very quick history, bringing you to that point, and then we can really tackle some thoughts on that in some following videos, right? So, Warhammer Fantasy, we'd had 8 editions of it. I came in at around about 2004, 2005, something like that. For me, the sweet spot of playing was probably 6th edition. I was okay, I guess, with 7. There was a lot of power creep, which means basically they were making the army books too powerful, and there was complaints, and they were going to need balancing, and I think that started to upset a lot of people. We had the 8th edition with the armies coming out differently. It was such a drastic change to the game, forcing you to have like multiple ranks of enemies, or at least for the meta, players were going to respond and do that, you know, to be competitive, for your armies to stand a chance. You had to have a lot of models, i.e. come buy more models, and it almost felt as if it was an attempt by G-dubs to say, hey, you know, we need to save our paltry sales here for fantasy, come buy more models for bigger ranked units, right? And then they just announced End Times, approximately 2014, sometime towards the end of that, and I think it was something like a 6-month process that End Times happened over. So, End Times finished the world, blew it up, no more fantasy for anyone else. It's cancelled. You effectively can't play the game anymore. I wouldn't have minded going back and played like 6th edition or whatever, but trying to find people to do that with, hey, you know, I don't know. So, there's this feeling of, you know, a live edition, and people want to be playing a live version of the game. I think there's a certain psychology to that. And it's been all of these years, and then in recent years there was some announcements that they were going to bring the old world back. And they were showing some races to do with that, some things that we've never really seen before in Warhammer Fantasy even. And, you know, they look very nice, especially like the Kislev ones. I thought, you know, that really stood out. And I'm hearing talk now that Cathay is going to be a thing, which is the more sort of Eastern theme of the Warhammer bit and that, you know. So, that's how Warhammer the Old World came to be, and it's going to be releasing here in 2024, officially, properly, right? With the first 2 armies. So, on the journey, you know, getting here, I think GW had took some liberties really with the players. It's almost like it was a slap in the face. I've done 2 rant videos on this subject. One basically at the time talking about End Times and how I thought the entire thing was a joke. And then a follow-up saying, well, you know, the lore was still doesn't really work for me. I think it's still crap on Age of Sigmar, right? Which followed fantasy. So let's continue that vein, you know. So fantasy gets killed, the world blows up, and then they create this new setting, this skirmish fantasy game, which is extremely high fantasy and highfalutin. Everything's going maxed out and hyperbolic. And it's too hyperbolic for me, so that it just becomes bollocks. I think, personally, the way, you know, the maps look and just like the way they describe everything is just maxed out. It's like adrenal overload, basically, on every page of everything. Whereas fantasy was more sort of that real kind of fantasy setting, ye old tavern, and, you know, I can't imagine anything in Age of Sigmar having a ye old tavern. You know, it'd be a floating tavern that spews forth, you know, fire gouts to keep it floating, and it can use them as weapons to keep like demonic encroaches off that are trying to, you know, fire chains up out of their mouths into the thing and then climb up through their own intestinal chain things and the flame gout things. But, you know, if I keep talking like this nonsense, they might hire me for the fluff, so I better shut up, right? So there I go into rant territory again. Right, so, you know, the way I had to look at Age of Sigmar was this. Fluff, complete nonsense, right? The fact that it's like that, fine, okay. It's a miniatures game with whatever tactics and skirmish. Yeah, I'd love to get into that. Now, at this point, now they've made it decent. But, you know, I like to approach a game usually with all aspects of it. Not just, oh, I just want to play it. Just for, you know, oh, I could play these Disciples of Tzeentch or whatever. Right, that would be okay. I don't just want to just do that and say, oh, well, those are the rules and that's kind of how they play, and, you know, just that surface level kind of thing, and not getting into the fluff and not understanding what the world's doing and not understanding what my faction's doing and not understanding kind of why they're doing what they're doing and where they exist within the world and who their affiliations are to and with and why and what and how. But I don't care. So I would play that completely, you know, just as like a tactically interesting miniatures battle and then just walk away again after every game. You know, there's no narrative interest in it for actually what's going on. So that's Age of Sigmar, and I think they made it even worse when they did those joke rules for it as soon as it came out. It was just, you know, those ridiculous things like if you have a moustache, then you have whatever bonus, and if your opponent does some sort of theatrical behaviour or something, then they'll get some bonus or whatever. You know, just, it was like a smack in the mouth. It was like an absolute piss take, really, for us that's just lost our game. A lot of time went by, and people obviously, you know, Age of Sigmar came out and it went through editions, and it's improved to the point where I feel like I could play it probably now in a surface way, as explained. And then the old world gets announced, and it's finally coming. And I think, you know, the thing is, the old world is set like, I don't know, a couple of centuries or whatever before the end times. So it's a different time period. So it's not a retcon, it's not a reset. They're just going back in time and they're saying, this is a different period of time. There's different stuff going on. The Empire looks different, this looks different, that looks different. You know, Teclis hasn't formed up the schools of magic, and it's all very, you know, a different landscape and theme and how you can explore that now. Because they want to get back to it. And why do they want to get back to it? Well, you know, because people are still clambering at it. It's still popular. Oh, that's strange. I thought it wasn't popular. Isn't that why they got rid of it? What's going on here? So you can't really trust the G-dubs here, can you, to make the right decision for you? And, you know, I think a lot of us are tentatively approaching the old world in this way. And I know I have been, you know, with that sort of slight worry, you know, will they screw this up for us? You know, you can only be this bitter. You can only be this impoverished for a game that really hit the spot if you love that game so much, you know. Love and hate, they are really, really, really close, you know. And this became a huge part of my identity, and they just cut it off and they say, nope. And then suddenly, you know, the new edition comes out and they're suddenly saying, hey, you know, buy the lore books, you know, buy these novels set in the old world kind of system and that. And one of the complaints I said at the time, you know, it was almost as if they were disrespecting their fluff during Warhammer Fantasy, because they went this, you know, 30 odd years or whatever, pretty much not moving the story on when they had opportunities to do it, like never ever moving the story. And then suddenly, you know, over the course of end times across 6 Earth months, you know, they just like move everything along, like 8 years worth or whatever in the world there, the whole end times process, and just kill the world like a load of stuff happened. And they finish the world off. So they can do it when they want to, right? But, you know, no sense of movement there. And, you know, a lot of models, they weren't getting released, and a lot of factions didn't have updates for years upon years, you know. They were still waiting for new factions, and I think that's quite interesting as well. And I'll get onto that on the next video, some of my initial thoughts there that I'm seeing in regards to the whole sort of old world release. But that's the history of how we got here, and we'll get on to more talking about the old world next.